There's a theory, unproven, controversial, but absolutely captivating, that suggests your thoughts aren't just confined to your brain. They might ripple outward, brushing against the very fabric of reality itself. Now, this isn't fantasy or mystical poetry. It's rooted in the most cutting-edge ideas of modern physics. Some physicists, philosophers, and consciousness researchers propose that your thoughts might not only exist inside your skull but could be quantum events, interacting with fields of energy that permeate all of existence. The thought you're having right now, the very act of being aware that you're listening to these words, could be resonating with something much larger, the quantum field. This isn't about telekinesis or science fiction. This is about peeling back the layers of what we know and stepping into the strange and fascinating overlap between quantum field theory and consciousness. The two domains may seem like they live on opposite ends of the intellectual spectrum, one hard science, the other introspective philosophy, but there's growing interest in how they might relate. At the core of this conversation is a provocative question. Can your mind truly interact with universal energy? Or are we projecting meaning onto systems that are just too complex for us to fully grasp? Yet, quantum field theory is not just about particles, it goes deeper than that. It's the idea that everything at its most fundamental level is a vibration or fluctuation in a quantum field. Your body, your chair, the stars, and yes, perhaps even your thoughts, they're all made up of these fields. Now, some thinkers push this idea even further. They propose that consciousness itself might be emerging from, entangled with, or even influencing these fields. While mainstream physics doesn't fully embrace this, the questions it raises are too intriguing to ignore. This video isn't about giving you final answers. It's about exploring the edges of science, where known physics meets speculative insight, where data-driven research meets bold hypotheses. You're about to hear how the very nature of reality is being reimagined by quantum theory, and how some believe your mind may play an active role in that structure. We're going to start with the basics. What exactly is a quantum field, and why does it matter to this conversation? Then we'll walk through the building blocks of quantum theory and how our understanding of particles evolved into something much more dynamic and strange. From there, we'll raise questions that challenge what we think we know, not only about the universe, but about ourselves. To understand how thoughts might interact with universal energy, we first need to grasp what quantum field theory actually is. This isn't just another complex physics term. It's the very blueprint that governs everything we know to exist. It's not the kind of blueprint you can roll out and look at, but rather an invisible, ever-present matrix in which particles and forces operate. At its core, quantum field theory, or QFT, is the idea that all matter and forces are manifestations of fundamental fields. These fields are not made of anything. They are entities in and of themselves, stretching throughout all space and time. Every particle you've ever heard of, a photon, an electron, a quark, is not a little marble flying around, but an excitation in a field. Think of it like this. When you pluck a guitar string, it vibrates and creates a tone. In the quantum world, when a field vibrates, it creates a particle. This is a massive departure from earlier views in physics. There was a time when everything was thought to be made of hard, indivisible particles. Then came wave-particle duality, showing that electrons and photons could act like both particles and waves. But even that wasn't the final form of understanding. The true leap came when physicists realized that what we call particles are just the visible outcomes of deeper, more fundamental fields. So what does this have to do with energy? Everything. These fields don't just sit there passively. They constantly fluctuate, even in what we'd normally think of as empty space. In fact, there is no true emptiness in the quantum world. What we call a vacuum isn't really a void. It's a seething, energetic foam, buzzing with temporary particles that blink into and out of existence. This idea, known as the quantum vacuum, challenges everything we think we know about stillness. Nothing is ever truly still. Even at absolute zero, the coldest temperature possible, quantum fluctuations persist. These fluctuations aren't just theoretical. Their effects have been observed in laboratories through phenomena like the Casimir effect, where two metal plates placed in a vacuum experience a measurable force pulling them together due to changes in the quantum field between them. Now let's take a quick trip through the timeline of how this thinking came to be. In the early 20th century, physicists like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg were grappling with strange behaviors observed in atomic systems. Electrons didn't follow neat paths like planets around the sun. They jumped between energy levels. They acted like waves. They acted like particles. There was no framework that could fully contain them. Then came quantum mechanics, which provided tools to predict these odd behaviors, but it was still incomplete. It treated particles like points and introduced probabilistic outcomes, but it didn't say much about the medium in which these particles existed. This is where people like Paul Dirac, Richard Feynman, and Julian Schwinger advanced things further. They helped build what we now call quantum electrodynamics, QED, the first true quantum field theory. It described how electrons and photons interact, not by throwing particles at each other, but through exchanges in their respective fields. This model was revolutionary. It didn't just improve accuracy, it changed how physicists viewed reality. Everything was fields. Particles were secondary. Forces were the result of field interactions. And this approach became the backbone of the Standard Model of particle physics. The Standard Model is still our most successful theory of fundamental particles and their interactions, except gravity, which remains the outlier. It describes 3 of the 4 known forces: electromagnetic, weak nuclear, and strong nuclear. It organizes all known particles into a framework of 12 fermions, which make up matter, and 12 bosons, which mediate forces. But even the Standard Model doesn't treat the vacuum as empty. In fact, it requires the existence of a quantum field called the Higgs field. According to theory, this field permeates all space. Particles acquire mass by interacting with it. The more strongly a particle interacts with the Higgs field, the more mass it has. When scientists finally discovered the Higgs boson in 2012 at CERN, it was hailed as the final missing piece of the Standard Model puzzle. So here's the key takeaway. Reality is not built out of tiny bits of matter. It is built out of invisible, omnipresent fields. Your body, your thoughts, your surroundings, and the entire cosmos are emergent properties of these interacting fields. This raises a bold and somewhat unsettling question. If these fields are everywhere, and if they never truly rest, then isn't it possible that our thoughts, which arise from physical brain activity, could in some way be connected to or influence these fields? It's a huge leap from accepted science into speculative territory, but it's not entirely out of bounds. After all, the brain is not exempt from the laws of quantum physics. Neurons operate via electrochemical signals. These involve electrons and ions, quantum particles. Some researchers argue that these interactions could be entangled with larger field dynamics. Quantum entanglement, for instance, is a well-documented phenomenon in which two particles become linked so that the state of one instantly influences the other, no matter how far apart they are. Could brain activity create or respond to similar connections within quantum fields? Traditional physicists remain cautious. The brain is warm, wet, and noisy, conditions usually thought to be inhospitable to delicate quantum states. Yet, experiments in quantum biology have shown that certain biological processes, like photosynthesis and bird navigation, may use quantum coherence. If that's possible in plants and animals, why not in us? This brings us to a critical pivot. Understanding quantum fields is step 1. The next challenge is understanding how consciousness, arguably the most complex phenomenon we know, might relate to those fields. This is where we begin stepping into the blurry space where physics and philosophy start to echo each other. In the next part, we'll explore one of the biggest mysteries in physics, the measurement problem. You'll hear how simply observing a system seems to change it, and why that strange fact has led some to believe that consciousness might be a player in the quantum game, not just a passive observer. Quantum mechanics has a strange rule. Systems exist in multiple states at once until they are observed. This isn't just a philosophical metaphor, it's a mathematical truth in the equations. Electrons don't sit neatly in one location or orbit. Instead, they exist as a cloud of probabilities. Only when a measurement is made, when someone or something observes, does the electron choose a specific position or state. This idea is known as wave function collapse. Before measurement, particles exist in a superposition, a blend of all possible states. The wave function is a mathematical description of that superposition. When a measurement happens, the wave function collapses to a single outcome. The question that has haunted physicists for a century is, what causes this collapse? Is it the measuring device? Is it an interaction with the environment? Or is it the conscious observer? This last option, controversial though it may be, has intrigued scientists and philosophers for decades. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, suggest that consciousness itself plays a central role in collapsing the wave function. In other words, the mind might be more than just a passive witness. It might be actively shaping what becomes real. This idea emerged from attempts to reconcile the mathematics of quantum mechanics with experimental results. In a famous thought experiment, Erwin Schrödinger imagined a cat inside a sealed box. Inside that box, a quantum event determines whether the cat is alive or dead. According to the theory, until the box is opened and observed, the cat exists in a superposition, both alive and dead at the same time. Only when someone opens the box does the cat's state become definite. This is, of course, absurd in real-world terms. We don't see half-alive, half-dead animals. But the experiment was never meant to describe biology. It was meant to expose how strange and counterintuitive quantum mechanics is. If particles can exist in multiple states until observed, and if observation causes one outcome to become real, then something very odd is happening in the relationship between the observer and the observed. Some interpretations, like the Copenhagen interpretation, sidestep this by saying that the act of measurement, regardless of who or what performs it, is enough to cause collapse. But that still leaves open the question, what qualifies as a measurement? Is it a conscious decision? A device registering a value? A system interacting with its environment? Other models try to bypass the need for collapse altogether. The many worlds interpretation says there's no collapse. Instead, all possible outcomes happen, each in a separate branching universe. You measure a particle's spin and the universe splits into two. One where the result is up and one where it's down. This avoids the problem of collapse but multiplies realities endlessly. Yet, despite these varying explanations, the fact remains, quantum systems behave differently when observed. This isn't speculation, it's experimentally verified. One of the most compelling demonstrations is the double-slit experiment. In this experiment, particles like electrons are fired at a barrier with two slits. On the other side is a screen that detects where the electrons land. If you don't measure which slit the electrons go through, they form an interference pattern on the screen, a wave-like pattern, as if each electron goes through both slits simultaneously and interferes with itself. But the moment you try to measure which slit the electron goes through, the pattern changes. The electrons behave like particles, not waves. The interference disappears. Simply trying to observe the path destroys the wave-like behavior. It seems that knowing the path forces the system to behave differently. The implication is profound. The presence of an observer alters reality. Whether it's a conscious observer or just a measurement device is still debated, but something about the act of observation changes the system. Now, if thoughts can influence measurement or are required for it, then they are more than mental chatter. They could be active participants in shaping reality. This is where the conversation starts to bleed into consciousness research. A few physicists and theorists propose that consciousness may not be separate from the quantum field, but a function of it. That your awareness might be a byproduct of quantum processes in the brain, or that your mind could be entangled with universal fields in a way science is only beginning to explore. Physicist Eugene Wigner, one of the pioneers of quantum theory, wrote that it was not possible to formulate the laws of quantum mechanics without reference to the consciousness of the observer. To Wigner, the mind was not just along for the ride, It was essential to the process. Others, like Roger Penrose, have proposed mechanisms for how quantum effects might exist inside the brain. Penrose, along with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, developed a theory called orchestrated objective reduction, orchestroR. It suggests that quantum computations occur in structures inside neurons called microtubules. These structures could allow the brain to harness quantum processes, meaning consciousness might arise from quantum interactions, not just classical neural firing. Though this theory remains controversial, it has opened up new lines of inquiry. If true, it could mean that your conscious awareness is not confined to classical biology. It could be entangled with deeper structures of reality. Let's tie this back to the measurement problem. If consciousness is indeed a quantum process, then maybe the reason observation causes collapse is because consciousness itself is part of the quantum field. Your awareness might not be outside the system. Looking in, it might be part of the system itself. A node of the field, interacting with other nodes, shaping outcomes. This would mean your thoughts, electrical patterns in the brain, are more than private experiences. They could be part of an ongoing, field-based interaction with the universe. When you observe, when you focus attention, you may not just be receiving information, you could be influencing the field around you in subtle ways. There's no consensus on this. In fact, many physicists remain skeptical of linking consciousness and quantum theory. But the fact that these questions are even being asked shows how deep the mystery runs. A few key experiments have started to test whether human intention can influence quantum outcomes. While the results are not conclusive, they're suggestive. Some small-scale studies at institutions like the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, PAIR, lab reported statistical anomalies in random number generators when people focus their intention on them. Critics argue the effects are too weak or inconsistent, but they raise questions that haven't been fully answered. Even in fields like quantum cryptography, there is growing interest in how the act of observation can be harnessed to secure information. Again, it's the observer that changes the outcome. And while these systems use detectors, not minds, the parallels keep coming up. So where does this leave us? We have a theory, quantum mechanics, that says systems remain indeterminate until measured. We have a field theory, QFT, that says everything is a field, and particles are just excitations. And we have a mystery, consciousness, that seems to play a role in how things become real. If consciousness interacts with the field, even in ways we don't fully understand, then your thoughts may not be passive. They could ripple outward. They could influence probabilities. They could shape outcomes not by magic, but by participating in a quantum structure that underlies everything. This doesn't mean your thoughts can instantly rearrange matter or bend reality at will. But it does suggest that awareness may be more fundamental than we've been led to believe. That what you focus on, what you think, and how you observe could matter not just subjectively but physically. We're still in the early stages of understanding any of this. Science moves slowly. It demands proof, repetition, explanation, and rightly so. But history shows us that some of the biggest breakthroughs come from asking the most unsettling questions. Are you a spectator of the universe or a participant? Does your mind simply reflect reality or help construct it? The answers may lie in the same fields that hold atoms together and shape the stars. If your thoughts are made of quantum events and the universe is made of quantum fields, then maybe the boundary between your mind and the cosmos isn't as solid as it seems. In the next part, we'll shift from theory to application. How might this understanding, however speculative, change the way we think about focus, intention, and the potential of the human mind? Let's consider the possibility that thought is not just an internal process, a flicker of neurons firing in isolation, but an interaction within a larger energetic field. If the brain functions as both a receiver and transmitter of information, then each thought might be a pulse in the quantum field, carrying energy, intention, and perhaps even influence. We know from physics that everything has energy. Motion, mass, even emptiness at the quantum level is teeming with virtual particles and fluctuations. Thoughts, too, have measurable energy, albeit small. Electroencephalography, EEG, detects brainwaves. Different states of mind, focused attention, relaxation, stress, each have distinct frequencies. These waves are real electrical activity that can be recorded. That's not speculative. It's standard neuroscience. But what if these waves don't just stay in the skull? What if thought projects into the space around you, into the quantum field? Many researchers have pointed out that the electromagnetic field around the body extends beyond the skin, especially from the heart and the brain. The HeartMath Institute, for example, has studied the coherence between heart rhythms and emotional states. Their findings suggest that when the heart and brain are in sync, when your emotional state is calm and focused, your electromagnetic field becomes more ordered and coherent. Coherence matters. In physics, when waves are coherent, they interact in a constructive way. They amplify each other. When they're incoherent, they cancel each other out. So a coherent brain or heart wave could interact more effectively with external systems, perhaps even with the quantum field. This leads to a provocative idea: attention as a carrier of influence. Attention isn't just a mental spotlight. It's an energetic act. When you focus on something, an idea, a goal, a memory, you're aligning neural activity. You're collapsing mental uncertainty into a clear signal. And perhaps, at a quantum level, you're collapsing external probabilities as well. This isn't about supernatural powers. It's about the potential efficacy of organized thought. A field interacts most powerfully when it is structured. Random noise does little. But focused energy, directed intentionally, may influence probabilities subtly but consistently. Imagine your attention as a laser beam. Scattered light doesn't travel far. But coherent light, like that of a laser, can cross long distances and cut through solid material. Similarly, scattered thoughts don't do much. But sustained, coherent attention may produce measurable effects on your brain, your body, and perhaps on events unfolding around you. This is not wishful thinking. It's a hypothesis drawn from both physics and experience. Athletes talk about being in the zone, a mental state of extreme focus where time seems to slow down and outcomes align with intention. Artists speak of creative flow, where ideas seem to come from nowhere and everything connects effortlessly. Monks and mystics describe similar states during meditation or prayer. In all of these cases, attention becomes unified. Thoughts are not fragmented but aligned. And with that alignment comes a change in the experience of reality. There may be a reason for that. Some theorists suggest that the quantum field responds not to isolated thoughts, but to coherence between mind, emotion, and intention. When your thinking, feeling, and attention all point in the same direction, the resulting signal may be strong enough to influence the field, or at least to tune your perception towards certain outcomes. This aligns with what we know from quantum field theory. Fields are not static. They fluctuate, respond to energy inputs, and interact with each other. If your brain and heart emit fields, and they do, then it's possible that coherent internal states could interface with external quantum fields. This may be why belief and emotion matter so much in shaping experience. It's not enough to casually think about something. You have to feel it, align with it, believe it. That emotional charge gives power to the mental image. It adds amplitude to the signal. It turns a passing thought into a resonant frequency. In practical terms, this suggests that focused, emotionally backed thought could influence probability distributions. Not in a deterministic way like pressing a button to change reality, but more like leaning the scales, tilting potential in a certain direction. This would help explain phenomena like intuition, synchronicity, and spontaneous insight. If your internal state is harmonized, perhaps your awareness becomes more attuned to relevant patterns in the field. You notice what you need, not because it suddenly appears, but because your mind is in resonance with that information. The same might apply to what some call manifestation. While that word is often misused, the core idea is not entirely irrational. If your thoughts are coherent, emotionally charged, and consistently focused, you might shift the field's probabilities towards certain outcomes. Not by force, but by resonance. Again, this doesn't imply control over the universe. but it does suggest participation. You're not a separate entity looking out at a dead, mechanical world. You are part of a living field, responsive, intelligent, dynamic. Even modern science is beginning to look at non-local interactions. In quantum mechanics, entangled particles can influence each other instantly, no matter the distance. Though controversial, some researchers wonder if entanglement-like mechanisms could occur in biological systems. Could parts of your mind, or your awareness, be entangled with aspects of the field that extend beyond your body? This brings us to the idea of the observer effect not being limited to measurement devices. If observation is a kind of interaction, then focused thought might be a kind of measurement, a way of selecting from among probabilities. The field doesn't collapse because of thought alone, but thought may participate in how reality organizes itself. In this light, the universe becomes participatory, not just governed by blind forces, but responsive to internal alignment. Your role isn't passive, it's creative. You don't just experience, you help generate what is experienced. This would give profound importance to mental discipline, emotional clarity, and intentional focus. Not for mystical reasons, but because clarity produces coherence, and coherence produces resonance, and resonance may affect the field. Here, ancient wisdom begins to overlap with cutting-edge theory. Practices like mindfulness, prayer, visualization, and meditation all aim at the same goal: organizing thought, aligning emotion, focusing attention. These are not escape techniques, they are tuning mechanisms. They help bring your internal state into resonance with deeper structures of reality. And perhaps, when this happens, you become more than just a thinker. You become a transmitter, an agent of energetic influence, subtle but real. You become a shaper of patterns, not just a watcher of events. There's still much we don't know. This field of inquiry remains speculative, but it's grounded in questions that physics itself has forced us to ask. What happens when we observe? What role does attention play? Can consciousness interface with the fundamental field of existence? You don't need to answer these questions to benefit from them. Simply considering the possibility changes how you think, how you feel, and how you focus. It makes thought less trivial, less idle. It reveals that your mental activity may matter more than you imagined, not just for your personal well-being, but for the energetic structure of reality. The idea that thought is a field interaction does not require belief, it requires openness. It invites a new perspective, where the invisible becomes active, and the intangible becomes essential. It calls us to treat attention with reverence, thought with care, and emotion with intelligence. In this worldview, the brain is not a sealed-off processor, it's a node in a larger network. The heart is not just a pump, it's a tuning device. And the mind is not a container, it's a wave. Your thoughts ripple outward. Your attention directs energy. Your internal coherence could be the key to external transformation. Next, we'll consider how this view connects with ideas from ancient philosophy and modern consciousness studies. How civilizations long ago may have grasped what science is just beginning to hint at. Long before the language of quantum fields, before Planck, Heisenberg, and Schrödinger, ancient civilizations were already speaking in metaphors that echo today's discoveries. They didn't call it energy fields or wave function collapse, but the underlying idea was strikingly similar. There is an unseen force that connects everything, and the mind can interact with it. In Vedantic philosophy, the concept of akasha was central. Akasha is often translated as ether or space, but it refers not just to physical emptiness. It is a subtle essence, a field-like presence that underlies all matter. According to this view, thought is not confined to the individual mind. It moves through akasha like waves in a pond, potentially influencing distant events or other minds. The Upanishads speak of a unified self behind all appearances, an awareness that is not separate from the cosmos but woven into its fabric. This awareness is not inert. It is active, intelligent, and participatory. And what affects it most directly? The quality of one's thought and intention. This isn't mythology. It's a framework for understanding mind and matter as interwoven, just as modern quantum field theory begins to suggest that particles are not separate things but excitations in a shared field. Ancient Chinese philosophy had similar insights. The Tao, often described as the Way, is not a path but a field-like flow. It governs everything, from the movement of stars to the rhythm of breath. It is subtle, ungraspable, yet real. And crucially, the Tao responds to alignment, not effort. You don't control it. You resonate with it. That word, resonance, is central to both the ancient and modern view. In Taoist thought, harmony with the Tao means adjusting your inner state so it mirrors the outer flow. In physics, resonance means two systems oscillating at compatible frequencies can exchange energy efficiently. Could the Tao be an ancient metaphor for the quantum field? Could resonance be the bridge between thought and manifestation? Likewise, in the mystical traditions of the West, Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, early Christian mysticism, there's the idea of as above, so below. What happens in the outer world mirrors what happens within. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. This isn't poetic, it's structural. It suggests a fractal relationship between the self and the universe, one nested within the other. If the universe is a field, then it's not unreasonable to think that small shifts in one part, a single thought, a subtle emotion, might influence other parts, not through force but through pattern. Even the ancient Egyptians, often thought of in purely material terms, pyramids, pharaohs, tombs, had a metaphysical framework rooted in energetic principles. Their word for life force, ka, was seen as an animating field that connected the human soul to cosmic order. Proper thought, ritual, and harmony were considered ways of maintaining this energetic balance. Indigenous traditions around the world also speak of the world as alive, connected, and responsive. Native American spirituality describes the Great Spirit as a living presence that listens, feels, and responds not just to action, but to thought. Similarly, the Aboriginal concept of dreamtime isn't just a creation story. It's a description of a timeless, field-like reality where past, present, and future overlap, shaped by attention and intention. These ideas were not rooted in scientific instruments, but in observation, intuition, and refined awareness. And yet, they arrive at similar conclusions. There's something behind what we see. A living matrix, a field of potential, a connection between consciousness and reality. Modern science, especially in its most cutting-edge theories, is starting to circle back to this ancient insight. When quantum field theory says particles are not objects but vibrations in fields, it echoes the idea that matter is a wave in a sea of potential. When entanglement suggests that space is not the separator we thought, it parallels the mystical insight that everything is already one, already connected. When consciousness is proposed as a non-local phenomenon, as some physicists and neuroscientists now explore, we are returning, perhaps unknowingly, to the core message of ancient wisdom. Mind is not a byproduct of matter. It is a fundamental aspect of the field itself. This raises a provocative possibility. Ancient knowledge and modern science are not in conflict. They are different languages describing the same underlying reality. One uses intuition and metaphor. The other uses math and measurement. But both point to a world where matter is not dead, thought is not private, and intention is not powerless. In this context, your thoughts are not internal monologues, but field interactions. When you think, you don't just affect yourself, you ripple the entire field. You send patterns outward, and the field responds with patterns of its own. Think of this like tuning an instrument. If you pluck a string on one violin, and there's another violin nearby tuned to the same frequency, the second will begin to vibrate. This is called sympathetic resonance. Your mind might function the same way. When your thought resonates with certain frequencies in the quantum field, outcomes aligned with that frequency may begin to emerge, not magically but energetically. Of course, this doesn't imply omnipotence. Not every thought becomes real. Not every intention reshapes the cosmos. There are layers of influence, biological, social, environmental. But within those layers, the field remains sensitive. Thought may be subtle, but subtle doesn't mean weak. In the realm of the quantum, the subtle defines everything. It's also worth noting that many ancient practices weren't about thinking more, but thinking less. They weren't about projecting force into the world, but about becoming inwardly still so that attention could become clear and the field could be felt. Silence, stillness, focus. These are not passive states. They are conditions of high coherence, where thought stops scattering and becomes structured. Just as a laser requires alignment of photons, powerful thought requires alignment of intention, emotion, and attention. Modern studies of meditation confirm this. Brain scans show that advanced meditators produce more synchronous brainwaves, less noise, more order. Their minds become like harmonized instruments, and often, their experience of the world shifts toward greater insight, peace, and sometimes even inexplicable synchronicities. Understanding the quantum field isn't just about physics or philosophy. It's about your everyday experience, your thoughts, feelings, intentions, and how they subtly influence your life. If thoughts are more than fleeting brain activity, if they are structured energetic patterns that interact with a universal field, then the way you think consistently and coherently becomes deeply significant. But how does this really work? Let's begin with a basic principle. Energy flows where attention goes. This isn't just a New Age idea. In neuroscience, attention determines which neural pathways are strengthened. In quantum theory, the act of measurement, the act of focusing, affects the outcome of a quantum system. On a practical level, your attention is not passive. It's directive. It filters reality. It selects possibilities from the field of potential and brings them into focus. Consider this: your brain receives millions of bits of sensory information every second, but your conscious mind processes only a small fraction. What you focus on shapes your internal world, and that internal world feeds back into how you behave, how you perceive new events, and what opportunities you even notice. If you focus repeatedly on lack, threat, or disappointment, your mind becomes attuned to those frequencies. You begin to see them everywhere, not necessarily because the world is full of them, but because your perceptual filter is tuned that way. This creates a feedback loop. Negative thought feeds negative perception, which feeds further negative thought. But shift your focus toward gratitude, clarity, or calm, not just once, but repeatedly, and your filter changes. You begin to detect new opportunities. You feel different in your body. You behave differently. Others respond differently to you. The field of experience shifts, not dramatically at first, but reliably over time. Is this magic? No. It's pattern recognition, emotional entrainment, and quantum coherence, all working together. Thoughts are not just private events. They are frequencies, and the field is responsive to those frequencies. Now let's add emotion to the equation. Emotion isn't just the result of thought, it's an amplifier. A thought infused with strong emotion has more energy behind it. In both spiritual traditions and modern manifestation practices, this is often emphasized. Clarity of thought matters, but emotional alignment matters more. An emotionally neutral thought is like a whisper in a large room. A thought charged with deep feeling is like a sound amplified by resonance. That's why fearful or anxious thinking often feels more real. It's not because it's more accurate, but because it's emotionally louder. The field doesn't distinguish between good or bad, right or wrong. It simply responds to vibration, intensity, coherence. This brings us to the importance of mental coherence. In physics, coherence means order. When light waves are coherent, they form a laser, powerful, focused, transformative. When waves are incoherent, they cancel each other out. The same applies to thought. If your mind is full of competing, contradictory, or scattered thoughts, the field receives mixed signals. The energetic effect is weak or confused. But when your mind becomes coherent, when thought, emotion, and intention align in the same direction, you begin to create a more potent signal. You're not just thinking randomly, You're broadcasting with focus. You're becoming like a tuning fork, clear, steady, and strong. Meditation is one way to cultivate this coherence. It's not about stopping thought. It's about reducing noise, organizing the mind, and increasing clarity. When practiced regularly, it trains the brain to move from chaotic beta waves to more organized alpha and theta states. This isn't just relaxation. It's energetic alignment. Visualization is another tool. Not just seeing an image in your mind, but feeling it, experiencing it internally as if it were real. The brain doesn't clearly distinguish between real and imagined experiences when both are emotionally rich. This is why athletes use mental rehearsal to improve performance. It activates the same neural pathways as physical action. It's a kind of quantum preparation, aligning your internal state with a potential outcome and sending a coherent signal into the field. Intention setting is equally important, but intention is not mere wish. It's a decision backed by focus and emotional commitment. It's not desperate or needy, that kind of energy signals lack. It's calm, grounded, and clear. It holds the idea of an outcome without grasping. In the quantum context, it's about aligning with a possibility without trying to force it. This is where faith or trust enters the equation. Not blind belief, but relaxed certainty. In quantum mechanics, particles don't follow deterministic paths. They follow probabilities. The field contains many possible outcomes. The one that becomes actualized depends partly on interaction, on measurement, on attention. If you push too hard, you introduce noise. If you release too much, you stop participating. The middle way is focused non-attachment. Clear signal, no grasping. Breathwork, affirmations, mindful movement, heart coherence. All of these are methods that help regulate your internal state, calm the nervous system, and tune your energetic signal. They aren't magical techniques. They are ways of adjusting your vibration so that you become more harmonious, more receptive, and more powerful in how you engage the field. Another aspect to consider is the collective field. You are not the only one sending signals into the quantum web of possibility. Human consciousness is a shared phenomenon. Thoughts, emotions, and beliefs circulate socially. When many people hold a similar intention, a field effect can occur. Some studies in group meditation have shown statistically significant decreases in crime or violence in certain areas. Whether or not these results are replicable, the principle remains interesting. Coherent intention multiplied across minds may amplify the field response. This is also why your environment matters. The people you surround yourself with, the media you consume, the conversations you engage in, these all influence the vibrational field around your thought. If your environment is chaotic, fearful, or dissonant, it becomes harder to maintain your own coherence. You are always interacting with the field, not just through thought, but through energy exchange with others. So cultivating your environment is not just about comfort. It's about alignment. If you want to shift your experience, you may need to shift the energetic quality of your surroundings. That might mean simplifying your space, changing your routine, spending time in nature, or limiting exposure to low-frequency noise, whether that's mental, emotional, or digital. Over time, this tuning becomes a way of life. It's not about controlling every thought. It's about developing awareness, noticing your patterns, understanding your emotional signals, and gradually shifting toward coherence. And here's the key. Small changes matter. A single coherent thought may not collapse the entire field into a new timeline, but over time, repeated coherent thought begins to change your energetic signature. Your habits shift, your decisions align, your perception refines, and slowly your external reality begins to reflect that change. It's not about overnight transformation. It's about compounding clarity. Think of it like ripples in water. One ripple fades quickly, but if you continue tapping the same spot, rhythmically and consistently, you create waves. Those waves reach the edge of the pond. Likewise, a scattered mind creates ripples in every direction. A focused mind sends waves outward, directed, rhythmic, meaningful. In the quantum field, nothing is isolated. Every change in your internal state sends a subtle signal into the unified whole. Whether that signal interacts with the world in a tangible way is not always immediate or predictable. But the principle holds: you are not separate from the field. You are a part of it. You influence it, and it influences you. The power of thought, then, is not about fantasy. It's about participation. It's about learning to recognize that what feels private may actually be interactive. What seems intangible may be influential. And what you consistently think may become part of the blueprint by which reality organizes itself. In this sense, your thoughts are not just reflections of the world. They are proposals to it. And the quantum field? It listens with perfect neutrality and infinite potential. You are not simply a bystander in the vast universe. You are a participant, subtle but significant. The quantum field is not something out there. It is here, right now, within and around you. It is the space in which all possibilities reside, and you are constantly in communication with it, through every thought, feeling, and intention. This isn't about adopting a new belief system. It's about becoming aware of a pattern that already exists. The way your inner world shapes your outer experience. Not through magic or force, but through resonance, attention, and coherence. Your mind is more than a container for thoughts. It's an instrument. Like a tuning fork, it vibrates with the signals you send. And the universe, the quantum field, responds not with judgment or delay, but with precision and potential. Every consistent pattern you emit becomes a kind of blueprint, influencing what shows up in your path, what people you meet, what opportunities you notice, and how your life unfolds. You don't have to control every thought. That's not the point. The invitation here is to become intentional, to start noticing the quality of your thoughts. Are they scattered or aligned? Rooted in fear or grounded in clarity? Are they reinforcing the reality you want or the one you fear? The field doesn't need effort. It needs coherence. And coherence doesn't mean perfection. It means direction, a steady signal, a chosen frequency. You can shift your state through presence, breath, visualization, or simply by becoming aware of the loop you're in and choosing a different signal. Each moment becomes an opportunity to tune yourself, not to escape reality, but to participate in it more consciously. You are not just reacting to the world. You are shaping it, even in the smallest ways, through the energy you carry. So when you think of the quantum field, don't think of distant particles and abstract equations. Think of possibility. Think of awareness. Think of the space between thoughts and how, in that space, everything is waiting. Your thoughts matter not because they are loud, but because they are signals. When focused, clear, and emotionally aligned, those signals begin to organize your experience. Not through force, but through resonance. And if there's one idea to carry forward, it's this. Your inner world is not private. It's participatory. The field is always listening. And your thoughts, each one, are a quiet but powerful act of creation. The question is not whether you're influencing the field. The question is, what signal are you sending?